The original seed of the idea for this company, this new company, was that Tersh was going to buy out Brandon, the one who founded it, starting a new company in which Brandon would work as a integral part, but not an owner at all. He would receive some of the net revenues of the business in exchange, but he wouldn't have an ownership stake. Brandon has had a little bit of a change of heart on that structure and is now proposing to Tersh the idea that they come up with some sort of partnership structure.
This conversation is one of those difficult conversations. The moments ahead could be very tense.
Well, my idea was to, if I were to start a partnership with you, I can...
Okay, we've agreed on humoring the idea of a partnership. How do we decide who owns the majority of the company?
Now it feels weird. I might need to start over. So I came up with this idea last night. What I was thinking was, if I were to sign on as a partner with you, I would be willing to, I guess, bring on everything that I have, and you wouldn't owe me everything that the business already owns.
How would you be compensated now? Because originally we were talking about you were going to be getting 75% net profit. Is that what it was?
It may have been 70. I don't remember exactly.
Whatever it was, that percentage of net profit on your existing customers as kind of like your payoff. But then how would we compensate now? How would we do that with you still being a partner or still being an owner in the company? What about your roles? Would your roles still transition over into sales completely?
I wouldn't say completely. I guess the roles would probably maybe be changed a little bit, unless if you were wanting to do something like, you wanted to do the entire management side of it and you wanted me to do the entire sales and or marketing side of it. I think what it would be different for me is I would have a lot more stake in it also.
Yeah. Instead of you selling out all your rights, you're actually responsible for.
And my name would be on the line also with you. So I guess that's why the roles would have to change a little bit.
That's the reason I asked that question.
Because honestly, me not having any ownership initially sounds a lot easier and better to me right away. I love that first plan that you had set up. But what I was started thinking was, down the road, I might be happier still having ownership in it as opposed to just working for you. I'm not turned off to it, and that's why I said I'm not totally, completely sold on the idea, because there is a lot more risk all over again that I originally wanted to just say I'm done with.
What would happen if you purchased a company and the previous owner stayed on board, and maybe they stayed on as a consultant or as a salesperson, and then that person starts to feel spiteful maybe, or maybe has some regret at the fact that you took that company from where they had it and then turned it around and made it a larger company, made it a more successful company, a more profitable company. What happens to that employee at that point? Do they become resentful towards you? Are they happy for you? How do you solve that problem? How do you prevent that from happening again? So should you not keep them as a consultant, or should you do something different? Yeah, that's what I was asking the other day when we were talking about the name Icebound and everything, how you would feel later on if I took the name and then still made the company and we blew up with the company, how you would feel later, if you might feel regret that you didn't try and stick it out, or you didn't maybe have a foot in the game.
I don't think I would have regret, for the big reason because I'm at the point that I'm at in my life now. If we had this conversation 2 or 3 years ago, I might have felt like I had a little bit left in me to try a couple more things. But at this point, I am done trying to run Icebound by myself, no ifs, ands, or buts. I have no desire to try to do this by myself. I'm either 100% done with trying to own a business by myself, or start a partnership with somebody that I truly know and trust. And I've talked to you about that for a couple of years now, that you're the only person in Savannah that I would actually be willing to do that with. I did try the Mackle-John thing, which was the too good to be true kind of situation, and it turned out to be it actually was.
I was really voting for you on that one, because you really had a gold mine if that would have worked out for you.
But it didn't, and that was my last attempt. I'm done with my current situation, and that ended up backfiring also. And that's why I feel like I wouldn't have any regret, because I'm truly at that point where something's got to change.
How would you envision the partnership being, like, percentage-wise?
I don't want to do 50-50, because I feel like you got to have somebody that owns more than the other. Unless there's 3 people, then there's always a way to have a vote of some sort. But when there's only 2 people involved, I feel like 50-50 is a bad idea. I would be very comfortable with something like 60-40, because really anything over 50%, the other person would have the actual deciding vote. But I would be happy with something like 60-40, you being 60. And another reason why you can't do 50-50 in my mind is if 2 people disagree on something, there's no real legal way to actually say one way or the other. And I totally trust your opinions on how things should be ran. And even if it might not be the right one initially, I know you wouldn't go as far as drowning the business trying to make something work that won't work.
One of my biggest concerns is once it's time to pivot, if it ever becomes a time to pivot, if you're deadlocked in decision making, it's really difficult to say, hey, we really need to pivot right now, and the other one's super adamant about not pivoting. That kind of solves that problem.
And I also feel like even if I did disagree with something, I'm always open for change. So I feel like if you had this idea that you were hell-bent on, and if you couldn't sell me on that idea, you probably would want to think about it a little bit longer and make sure that's really what you want to do. And if nothing else, it might actually slow you down and make sure that you're really ready to do something like that. But when it's all said and done, I feel like for the most part, we agree on how we feel like the business should be ran and where we want it to go and what kind of business we want it to be. So I feel like if I was almost an opposite of you, it would be a lot harder for us to be able to agree and make decisions on stuff. But for the most part, I feel like we see eye to eye on almost everything.
Yeah, most everything except for flat rate.
Yeah, and that's a prime example. I trust your opinion. I'm super willing to give it a try. I obviously want to try to make it work. And if we come up with a situation where it won't work, then at least we could both say that we really tried it. This customer just is not going to work with this type of customer.
That's the biggest thing is I want to make sure that we give everything a fighting chance before we ex-nay it. That's with anything, because there's going to be some things that we're going to be working on that people propose ideas to us because we have an audience. They're going to say, hey, I want you to try this thing. We're going to say, well, that sounds stupid, but it may sound stupid to us initially because the industry doesn't use it or we've never done it before. And so if we just keep saying it is stupid and not try it, I don't see how we would stand out from anybody else, but not harm the company at the same time.
And at the same time, they're going to have to sell 2 people on the idea instead of just one.
Yeah, and that's like when we went to that class a couple weeks ago and we both were able to have the input and have asked the questions. I felt like we got most all of our questions answered. There's a few residual things that we have some questions about, but I feel like for the most part we got a lot of our questions answered because we were both there instead of just one of us being there.
And one thing that I found with personal experience is it seems like it would be a lot easier to have 2 main drivers in a company that's making decisions.
2 motivated people that want to grow and scale.
Yeah, because you're feeding off of each other, and if one person starts like losing motivation, you still have somebody else that's back there behind you pushing you. You don't feel like you're doing it alone. And if one person is absent, you still have a big driving force that's there that can make decisions that needs to be made. Me and you have talked about this too. One of your questions to me personally was, do you think you can sell as much if you're not an owner? I said that there are some customers that wouldn't be as acceptable to moving forward without the owner being there, but that kind of takes that out of the loop also. So that was kind of my thoughts on everything, and I came up with this idea last night. It's obviously not totally thought through yet, but I wanted to fill you out and see if you're open to that idea or not.
I'm not opposed to the idea, for sure.
I don't even think we even talked about everything that I wanted to propose to you. Being able to be a partner, I would be willing to obviously bring everything I have with me, and you wouldn't owe anything to me. And I would be willing to stay signed on as a personal guarantor for all the credit that the company will need. And obviously you would have to sign your name on too. I don't want to be the only one risking the credit.
Okay, let's take a break there. So, did you catch that? I will get to use the credit that Brandon's built. So, the negative side is that there are some things that I don't really agree with as far as the way that things are priced within Brandon's current company and the way the current company is set up. But the good side of the partnership would be that I get to use his credit, or the credit that he's built up with the company, in case we ever needed that. So I don't really want to bank on it. Like, I don't want to just start dumping all of this debt into the company right off the start. But having that initial line of credit just in case is always a super nice safety blanket to have. It almost seems like it's a peace of mind. Helps me feel like things are going to go a little bit smoother if we agree to this partnership.
To be able to grow fast, you truly need a large capital or a lot of backers, being credit or somebody else that's willing to back you. I mean, it's very expensive to start up a company and get it to grow rapidly.
Yeah, I would like to track the exact number that it takes, mainly in our area. I know across the country it's going to be different, but I want to track about what it costs us to do whatever we're doing.
Well, with commercial, that's a whole different ballgame than residential. With residential, a lot of stuff is COD, and commercial is typically net 30. And also, your parts for your van changes quite a bit too. If you're just doing residential, you're not going to have as many parts and the tools and equipment that you would have if you're doing residential and commercial. So starting off doing residential AC, commercial refrigeration, and also commercial cooking equipment and building performances, that's a lot of tools and a lot of equipment that you're going to try to start off with. To be able to do it without a lot of capital or a lot of credit, you would almost have to start off as residential and build the capital and or credit to move to the next level.
The bootstrapping.
It does help to have credit, and I did find that over the years that, like the American Express card, we were talking about that is a insanely valuable tool to have the American Express card.
But Dave Ramsey says not to use it. Don't let that finance your company.
Yes, but I'm not using the credit card to float a balance.
You pay it off every month.
Yeah.
Or try to.
Exactly. And I understand what Dave Ramsey is saying also, and that's where you have to be super careful, because if you're putting all this stuff on a credit card and you're expecting to get paid to pay off that credit card, there's a little bit of risk involved. If you do it the Dave Ramsey way, which is obviously the safer way, it's just going to take a bit longer.
So if we propose going in that direction,
obviously my pay would end up being more sketchy again.
am I wondering how we could reduce the sketchiness of it?
Actually, it wouldn't be sketchy, I guess. I guess it would be more like 60-40 profit.
Yeah, but you don't want to take all the net profit out, or else you can't grow the company.
True. It totally depends on how much my job description would change, if it would at all, for a while.
So we're going to transition away from the owner's percentages, becoming a partner, that entire conversation, we're going to transition into employees, teammates, team members, how to get new employees, what to do once you have employees, and how to make those employees rave about how awesome our company is versus where they have been in the past. And what do we need to do in order to make our company the most desirable company to work for? Why would someone willingly leave a job that they're making their hours and then they're making enough money to pay their bills? They're not as happy as they could be, but they don't have anything that they really want from a different company, but they're a really good technician. How do we get that guy or that girl to come and apply for a job with us? What makes us any different than anyone else? Why would anybody else come and call on us? Have a listen to a few of the ideas that we've come up with.
And another thing I was wanting to ask you about is one thing that other company did do that I had previous experience with was at the end of the year, they took 50% of their net profit and they gave it back to their employees every single year. That's something that really makes them feel insanely appreciated and makes them feel proud of where they work. And it pushes them a little bit harder to be a little bit more conscious with the money that they're spending and trying to be as profitable as possible for the company.
Yeah, the profit sharing in general.
I guess it's profit sharing, but it's not handed out evenly either. If you have...
It's on a tier system.
Yeah, and I feel like it would be fairly easy to track how much each employee actually made for the company that year. And you can weigh that out. You can weigh out their performance.
How about a dispatcher? Because they're not necessarily a revenue generator, but without a dispatcher, you can't make the revenue generator stay on task.
Very true. And that's what I was about to get to with that was you can weigh in their attitude, their job performance, and just how well they're actually contributing to the team. Are they a team player? Do you have a dispatcher that is just negative all the time? They're keeping their guys busy, but they're just bringing the whole team camaraderie down, but everything else stays on point. You can weigh that in. Or do you have somebody that is awesome team player, everybody loves, everybody gets along with this person, but messes up every now and then? You can kind of weigh all that in. There's a little bit of a gray area and a little bit of opinion, and how do you actually feel and what do they actually deserve? That would be kind of hard.
Yeah, but that's part of managing, I feel like, it is opinion based. I mean, you don't want them to be sucking up to you to be a sycophant or anything.
You can see that, though.
Some people can. Some people are blinded by the flattery.
But that's something else that I really appreciated what they did. If you're wanting to stand out amongst the other companies, really make people feel like they found a home and where they want to work forever, that's a great step forward.
That potentially is a very large number.
Yes, it is. But you are talking about net profits, and without them, you wouldn't have that money in the bank anyways. And that's pretty much how it was worded to me.
Well, the thing about it is they still got paid, though. If you're doing it right, your net profits, those go into your growing expenses. That's your growing funds, the company's growing funds. So,
well, that's what the other 50% was for.
Yeah, but in a way, it's like these employees are being selfish because they're taking money that could be growing the company.
Yes.
I'm not saying that that's the case, but...
My wife worked for somebody for 8 years. And at the end of every year, her employer would let all the employees know what he was doing. He wasn't trying to hide it. He was trying to unload a lot of extra money that he made that year to avoid certain taxes. So he would actually go out and buy like a whole bunch of trucks that year, brand new trucks with cash and stuff like that. And if you can only imagine what that makes your team feel like when your employer is throwing all that money out there and spending the money when you would love to have some. You helped make that money and they're just trying to unload it for no real reason. They didn't need the new vehicles by any means, but he's just trying to spend the money somewhere.
I feel like that's a good idea as long as the company's not suffering. As long as the company has equipment and everything that's up to date, you're not running 10-year-old vehicles that the transmission's burning out in them and stuff like that, but yet we're giving away 50% net profits to employees. Or employees start resenting that you're buying new vehicles because you have to keep a new vehicle or a relatively new vehicle on the road. And then the employees are resenting the fact that you're buying that. So that's coming out of their profit shares.
Well, if you're paying an employee fairly and then you say, here's $5,000 at the end of the year, I don't think they're going to be mad that they're driving in a new van also. And you're talking about having the old equipment and stuff like that. Well, we're talking about an end of the year bonus. It's up to you.
Yeah, I know that. I'm just saying, like, throughout the year, like, I'm just thinking long term, really. So you get like a guy that's been working with you for, I don't know, call it 10 years. And every year they know what you're doing. I mean, they know that you are going to give out a profit share at the end of the year. And then throughout the year, they see you, maybe we're buying something that's more vanity to show off at parades or something, to get just stuff to get people's attention and something that we might not necessarily need. So if we get something for like something to go through parades with, and so call it a golf cart or something, and they're like, you don't need that for an air conditioning company, but you're using it as a marketing tool to go through parades to get people's attention, and you have it, the Icebound logo all over it and everything else. So I mean, it's obvious that it's not for your personal enjoyment. I mean, you're using it for the business side of stuff, but then that guy kind of holds resentment towards you because you, let's call it $7,000. I haven't priced these things out, but I know that they're not cheap, but let's call it $7,000 for one of those things. And that guy gets mad because you spent $7,000 on that versus he could have gotten maybe $1,000 out of that $7,000.
I do see what you're saying, but a typical Christmas bonus, what would you say you'd be used to seeing?
$500.
Or what would you expect? $500.
$500, $1,000 max, probably, would be my guess.
Exactly. So if you're actually talking about giving somebody a few $1,000s,
would you call it a Christmas bonus versus a profit share?
I would have to talk to a CPA about that.
No, not for legal standard. I'm talking purely for expectation things like.
Oh, absolutely profit share then, because one of our biggest problems is finding qualified, decent tech, right?
Yes and no. Yes, I agree with that. I agree that that exact term that you just used, we do have problems finding. But there are a lot of people who are of high quality, but have been burnt by less than desirable employers. I don't want to call somebody a scumbag, but sometimes the bosses just are jerks and they've burnt somebody that could have been a really, really good person in our trade.
Now, what if we were a couple years in and we started doing this profit sharing thing and the word got out what we were doing? Do you think you would have a hard time finding the next guy when you needed one?
No. I feel like we would have a stack of resumes sitting in my file cabinet at all times.
But not your Indeed resumes, like qualified resumes.
I'm talking about people who just know other guys in the industry and they're just like never have a bad thing to say about us. That's kind of my goal. Like when you go to a supply house and people are just bitching about each other nonstop, complaining about the company, like I want them to say, well, man, I don't have anything bad to say.
What do you think are your two biggest hangups in growing a business?
Just two. I mean, obviously one is going to be capital and the other is going to be employees, but I could also say just as much a customer base, making sure that your customers are there. Like you have customers, you have clients that are picking you up. And then in the same token, being known, so that kind of throws marketing into it. So marketing is a big factor.
Marketing can kind of go along with employees doing outside sales and stuff too.
You're saying like the employees becoming your first fanatic, your first fan, and then
absolutely
they're selling the company to all of the people that they interact with. But the thing about it is you got to get the employees in the door though.
That's the trick, is getting the ball rolling. But you know, when an owner operator is running around doing service work, they don't have a hard time finding work, do they?
I feel like the answer is no to that. But it's hard to grow when you're the guy running around catching all the calls too.
Absolutely. So what's the difference between an owner-operator and your average employee?
They don't have stakes in the company.
Yeah, they don't have stakes, and they don't feel as passionate about the company as you do, right? So what if you're able to build that passion in every service tech and give them a little bit of stake and almost give them that feel like they don't own the company, but they kind of have a feeling like they kind of do in a way.
Like most every conversation that Brandon and I have, our minds work in such funny ways that we'll talk about one subject and then all of a sudden we start chasing a rabbit into a rabbit hole. This is a prime example. We're talking about employees and employee retention, and then we get on to the subject of talking about Ralph and Zach's podcast, the HVAC Shop Talk, and an interview that I had with them a few weeks prior to the conversation that Brandon and I are having, which leads me to another point. Make sure you're checking out everybody on the Blue Collar Roots Network. You know, you got Brian Orr with HVAC R School. So you got Bill Spoon with Building HVAC Science. And then you have Brent Ridley and Billy Noth. Those guys are the Tool Pros. They have the Tool Pros podcast. Zach and Ralph, of course, they have HVAC Shop Talk. That's what Brandon and I are talking about right now. And then Zach does a thing on his own. It's called The Tradesman. All of those are really good podcasts. If you're not familiar with them, check them out. BlueCollarRoots.com. Then we have a couple of other ones. I'd Rather Be Fishing and the Wash and Paint Academy. Like, subscribe, and leave us a review. 5 stars. You will be glad that you did, because I'll be glad that you did.
By the way, have you listened to the podcast with me and Zach and Ralph? It was a 2-part podcast that they did. It was released last week and this week.
On business mastery?
No. It was on HVAC Shop Talk.
No, I have not. That was one I was going to try to listen to.
It was pretty funny. The actual podcast, I think, is maybe like 2 hours long, probably, like between both of them. But I think that we actually were talking for 5 hours that day. It was between 3 and 5 hours, but I'm pretty sure it was closer to 5 hours by the time it was all said and done. Because we were on video just talking about everything. Bunch of crazy stuff.
That's why you have to have the 2-part series, huh?
Yeah, that's why it was 2 parts. And he could have made even more. I know he cut a lot of stuff out. We just barely hit on stuff like profit margins versus marking up something versus having margins on it. And he did a live giveaway last night, and I was on there. I was trolling the hell out of him. It got so bad that YouTube quit letting me comment.
Really?
Yeah, they said give somebody else a chance for a second or something like that. They were like, you've commented too many times in the past.
That's awesome.
And it wasn't that I was commenting a lot. It was just that I was like saying one sentence, then hitting enter, and then saying another sentence and hitting enter instead of typing it all out. That way it kind of stayed in context.
Instead of writing that paragraph
of what they're actually talking about while they're doing it.
That's awesome.
Have you ever heard of R290?
That's the propane refrigerant, I believe.
The guy just added me on Facebook, and he has a video of a guy that's obviously in Europe, it looks like, and they vented the refrigerant. They were changing the compressor, and they actually showed him venting the refrigerant outside the window. He's replacing the compressor, and they're just like doing step by step on replacing this compressor and pulling a vacuum and recharging it and stuff.
It's pretty scary to me. I don't know enough about working on it. I actually have a customer that has a reach-in with it.
With propane?
Yeah. I keep my fingers crossed every day that it doesn't develop a leak, because I don't really know how to handle it yet. I know it is a lot more popular in Europe already, but around here, I've only seen one reach-in personally.
I think you're right. R290 is propane, known as CARE 40, CARE 40. It's a refrigerant grade propane.
One of my concerns is, let's say it graduates into going into residential equipment.
I've been told that it's headed that way.
What if you have an evaporator coil that springs the leak and your heat strips turn on?
But how bad of a leak is it?
Sounds pretty sketchy.
I mean, you know, whenever you have propane coming out of your grill, your whole grill doesn't explode.
Well, your whole grill explodes if you turn on the propane for a minute and you leave the lid closed and then you hit the igniter.
Good point.
And you have all kinds of electrical and
Yeah, I feel like they would have to like turn the fan on first, but then that could maybe create a spark if there was some sort of malfunction.
yeah, there's that. Or you have a residential equipment that takes 10 pounds of this stuff. Let's go ahead and, fog out the house with propane and then start a spark.
10 pounds. I wonder what 10 pounds would do, because how much comes in the cylinders that go underneath your grill? Like a 30 pound or a 50 pound?
But that's residential. What if it goes to commercial and you have 100 pounds? I feel like you have potentials to have a bomb. I don't know a whole lot about it.
What would happen if some like domestic terrorist or any kind of terrorist could figure out if a grocery store had propane racks or something and they used it as a bomb?
Yeah. What if you have a neighborhood kid that the neighborhood kids like start trying to screw around with your stuff and, hey, at the street, let's shoot a hole in it with a pellet gun and then let's start shooting Roman candles at it.
I think it's a big what if.
Kids are crazy.
I know, I used to be one. Okay, so let's go back to business. Let's get away from blowing people up.
One thing that I was wanting to do a few years back, obviously never did, was instead of having a fleet of white work vans, I wanted to actually have a fleet of silver vans.
The only problem with that is you'll never find a used one. So if you're going to buy a brand new, that's fine, as long as you budget for that. But
And you have to commit to it, and that's the big thing.
yeah, that's another thing. And then not all the silvers are the same. So like if you go from one brand to the other brand of vehicle, you'll either have to do like a full body wrap with silver, basically.
Which is insanely expensive.
Even getting the great deal that we got in the past, or that I've gotten in the past, it still is in the $3,000 range. So you can just go ahead and add that to the price.
Yeah, I think the 3/4 wrap was $2,500 for me.
Yeah, I got the guy that I did last time. He did my 3/4 wrap, and it was $1,800. He did a jam up job. I'll use him forever.
Talking about on your truck?
Yeah. He did the one on my truck, but the one on all the vans. The one on our truck, it was kind of the first time he'd ever done that kind of wrap, because it was like 3 different layers on top of each other. But it did have that one spot that came loose, but he was like, bring it back to me. I'll get it taken care of.
Yeah, anybody that acts like that is going to be a good person to work with.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, you're probably right. White is obviously going to be your safest bet, and especially if trying to find used vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. We can pick up a used Transit Connect or something. Start out maintenance guy in that. How do you feel about a podcast release last night with Andy Holt for that outdoor university that I went to on the lake a few months back?
I didn't listen to it yet.
Well, he has a program that I think it's $5,000 per person. Could be wrong on that. It may be $1,000 per person. He takes a 100% green guy and goes from being green to being a revenue generator in a maintenance role in 9 days.
Wow. My first thought, while you're explaining it, was maybe they should have some kind of previous commitment, like they've already been with us for a year, but that wouldn't work out. So how would you know who to put that kind of money into, and how would you know that you're going to get it back?
Exactly. Well, so here's my thought on that. If a technician rides around with you or rides around with someone, you have to train them. So that's going to slow down your lead guy, whoever he is. And also your lead guys are usually the ones that don't do the best job in cleaning systems, because they know what you can get away with. So you know that that'll work. Even though it's not 100% right, it'll work. So then instantly this guy's getting bad habits from the get-go.
Let's say that his fee is only $1,000.
I don't think it's $1,000. I think it's $5,000. I think that's what it is.
That makes it extra scary, because you had the $5,000 investment for him, but now you have to pay for it.
That's not the only thing. He needs at least 3 people to do it. I think that's an initial investment of $15,000.
Wow.
But he comes to you and stays on site for 9 days, 9 business days.
You're actually sending your new guy with this guy on service calls.
Yes. But also he'll go to like he would come to my house and he would go to different places and they would just go through the whole house and look at all that stuff too.
Well, with all that being said, I feel like it would be cheaper and almost more cost effective to do that in-house.
Versus paying him to do that?
Yeah. You can have a service tech or you can have a trainer.
Maybe I'm wrong on the price. I thought that's what he said. Maybe it was $5,000 for all 3 people, but I really want to say it was $5,000 per person. And he is trying to get like vendors to reach out and pay for some of it or all of it or something.
Sponsor it. And it's in the vendor's best interest to get their stuff installed properly.
Yeah, or serviced properly. Or these guys can find potential problems and there may be a system replacement involved in that.
I think the best answer is if it seems to make sense on paper, try it out one time, see how it goes. You never know until you try it.
That's a big investment to see how it goes. If it's $15,000. But at the same time, so another thing I just thought of as I was saying that means you need to hire 3 green guys at the same time.
Are you hiring 3 green guys? Well, I worked for a company. The way they had it set up is if you don't know anything about HVAC at all, you're going to start off as an installer's helper. At that point, you're instantly making money because, you're the guy wrapping duct, you're beating metal pipe together, and you're the grunt that's trying to help hang the ductwork and stuff. So they're going to start learning about HVAC there.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Like, is there a shortage of great employees or great qualified technicians, or do we just have crappy bosses? Because I was that person that got stuck on the install crew wrapping ductwork, and I was like, nah, this ain't the life for me. And I went in there, I went to the owner's office and said, hey, look, man, I don't want to be any kind of way, but this job's below me. I'm not a duct wrapper. I just cannot stand in the same position all day, every day. And the guy that was coaching me on how to do it wasn't very helpful either. Like, he was, hey, go wrap that duct. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to wrap it or to measure it or anything. And now I'm covered in insulation because I'm rolling around in this stuff because nobody showed me the proper way to do it without getting the crap all over me. And I go into the boss's office and it's like, look, dude, this is not for me. I'm cool with this. I'll go back to working in a factory for $17 an hour, just pushing a button and just staring at a glass wall over rolling around in insulation for $10 an hour.
What if your boss said, I appreciate you coming to me with your concerns. This is what we would like to be able to do. So if this isn't working out for you, which I'm glad it doesn't, because we have a shortage of service helpers. So for you to be able to move up, this is all we need you to be able to do. We need you to try to get more familiar with this and this and this. These are the tools we're going to give you to be able to do that. And we still need you to get fairly familiar with ductwork and how it all operates. So in the meantime, just try to stick with us. We're going to give you the tools to advance your knowledge a little bit more so you can start start transitioning into service work. Would you be willing to stay then? And since they just told you the value of what you're doing and why it's necessary, and they gave you the tools to progress yourself.
We're assuming that they actually follow up on that promise.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that give lip service is the point I'm getting at.
Well, you're not going to be that company, are you?
No.
Your team knows you're not that company, right?
That's what happened to me. So I went into the office and that's pretty much the exact conversation that we had. Well, hey, we appreciate that you're not just a duct guy. It was a shopping center and we had 5 systems hanging in the ceilings. And, it's actually the building that barbecue place is in Pooler that you and I went and ate at, that you do service work at.
Mm-hmm.
It was that complex. It was when that building was first built. So that whole strip, there was no studs, there was no walls or anything. We were hanging the air handlers and running the ductwork straight out on those. So I finished up that building and then started riding with a service tech. And then that service tech realized that I could read schematics. And he was like, look, there's no reason for you to even be training, doing this, that, and the other. I mean, I wish that I had trained more because there were a lot of things that I don't even think that service tech knew about air conditioning that I had to learn on my own. Even a lot of things that he did know that I had to learn on my own that I probably should have gotten more training on. But the fact that I could read a schematic and I understood what PSIG meant versus understood that 14.7 was absolute or whatever, atmospheric pressure. So they were like, oh crap, yeah, like we kind of have a golden nugget here. Let's just go ahead and put you in a service band. We'll make you a service tech like within a couple weeks. And pride probably took over at that point. Instead of saying, hey, wait, I need more training, probably was like, yeah, let's go. I'm good with this.
I feel like it would be very helpful to have somebody that can train in-house a little bit. And, for people like that, you can even offer an after-hours class.
I tried that.
Every other Saturday from 9 to...
When I was a manager, I tried that. I didn't do it on Saturdays, though. You know what I did? It was after work, and it was like, hey, you can come. It's 100% voluntary, but we'll pay you. And it's for an hour, and we're going to go over the basics of everything. And that was when I was a service manager at that same place. And I would have somebody show up every now and then, but for the most part, I would prepare an entire lesson plan, basically, and then nobody would show up. I'd even order pizza and everything for it.
Oh, maybe you can even do it before work starts during X amount of months. Obviously not your major summer month.
Well, that's kind of pushing it. Yeah. That's a good point.
When you're not very busy.
So my long-term goal is to be as remote as possible. So therefore, I don't want a huge warehouse. I don't want a huge office place. I want everything to be as remote as possible because, that's the direction that the entire world's going, is to remote everything. I understand interaction with employees, and I understand that. But my thought is that we would meet somewhere at least once a week and have like a buffet breakfast or something like that, and just chit chat and talk to each other and hang out and grow the camaraderie that way. So if we didn't have quote unquote an office complex, how would we have that training session? Meet somewhere and do a training session.
Same way.
Like at a breakfast?
At a banquet room or something. Yeah.
Well, that's a good idea. I guess we'd have to talk to the manager there first and say, hey, we're going to bring in a little tripod or whatever what's that thing? A easel, so I can use a whiteboard eraser and stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that would be very doable, and I'm all about supporting my customers. So we'll find a customer that we have a great relationship with and ask them to use their banquet room. Obviously, they're not going to want to do it for free. That's continuing the relationship.
They may just so you can pay for breakfast and you can use it as long as they're not using something else.
Absolutely. There's all kinds of options. There's a solution for everything.
I agree with that. I just was, thinking out loud on that.
The scariest thing about being remote, like you're talking about, is you have to be persistent. If you don't have that team camaraderie, then you're just another company.
Yeah, absolutely.
If John doesn't know Joe, then you're messing up.
Yeah. And there's no, before, whenever I was talking about going to the supply house and people, complaining about their company, there's no reason for them to stand up and say that they like where they're at.
Yeah, I feel like the better you can get everybody to know each other, the more of a family it's going to be. And that family atmosphere, I feel like, is what really grows a company.
Oh, I agree 100%.
That's the difference between having customers that will call you back and the customers that wants to tell all of their friends.
Yeah.
The best way to listen to this podcast is by using your smartphone or other web-connected device and subscribing using the podcast app on Apple devices or the Stitcher app or Google Play Store for Android devices. You can find all our shows on the Blue Collar Roots Network by going to bluecollarroots.com. From all of us at Blue Collar Roots, thank you for listening.